also everyone else was bringing iPads.
Ready?
Ready to go get one.
All right, I guess this is a police holiday today, because we usually have representation, but. All right, okay, so we're going to call our meeting to order. Welcome to the Board of Trustees regular meeting agenda, Winter Springs, August 19th, 2025 at 5:32 PM. City Hall Commission Chambers, 1126 East State Road, 434, Winter Springs, Florida. Welcome, everybody. Want to acknowledge Holly and Finance, of course. Brian, thanks for showing up tonight. And Christian, as always, appreciate it. We are going to move to roll call, right?
Yep. Chair Marco Santoro.
Aye.
Vice Chair Arif Farid.
Yep.
Board Member Michael Blake.
Here.
And Board Member Brandon Fair.
Here?
Board Member David Withy. Thanks.
Okay. Ready? Okay. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so before we get to the approval of the minutes from Thursday, May 8th, do we have any changes in the agenda? No changes. Okay, great. All right, we're going to move to public input. I don't think we have too much going on there, but anybody that wishes to speak during public input on any agenda item or subject matter would need to fill out a public input form. Individuals limit their comments to 3 minutes. Homeowner associations will limit their comments to 5 minutes unless otherwise determined by the commission. Are there any public input? No. Okay, all right, so I think we can move on. Christian? All right, so we're going to move to the consent agenda from the minutes, May 2025 Board of Trustees regular meeting. Make a move to approve the minutes.
Second the motion.
Okay.
Seconds.
Board Member Blake.
Aye.
Board Member Fair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Farid.
Aye.
Chair Santoro.
Aye. All right, so we're going to move to our regular quarterly agenda with David West, of course.
All right, good evening, everyone. I've got actually, hopefully an interesting agenda tonight. I'm going to have a couple of recommendations to put on the table for discussion. Before I get into that, though, I just want to introduce my consulting colleague here, Jack, and let you know he's here. I just entered into a professional transition. I completed some negotiation with my management, and over the course of the next year, I'm going to be very carefully transitioning the vast majority of my clients. I did a iPhone calculation. I had to do it twice. This is my 40th year in institutional asset management / advisory services. My wife retired 6 months ago, and I'm getting a little push here, so it seemed like a good time, to start the transition. I want you all to know this is being done very carefully. It will be very methodical. I requested, or actually demanded, that I have the ability to hand select the consultant that I think is a most appropriate fit for the board. Jack and I will be double teaming you basically for a couple more meetings. Obviously, this is a moving train, and Jack needs to be completely familiar with where the train's been, where it's going, And as we transition probably a couple of things tonight, he needs to participate in that in addition to being completely aware with the usual, the liability, actuarial familiarity, and also the give and take that we have at these meetings. So Jack, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Jack Evett. I'm a director in the consulting group. When Dave decided he was going to kind of slow down and sort of transition at some point into retirement, I think it's a great opportunity for me to get back in front of clients. I've been with the firm since 2010. I've been in a management role since 2017. And I led one half of our consulting effort. So 16 consultants really reported to me all over the country. But prior to that, been a consultant in predominantly in Florida, predominantly with public funds, but a lot of places like Texas, Virginia, Oklahoma, and places like that. So I have a lot of experience on the consulting side. Spent 7 years on the investment policy committee for the firm. And really look forward to getting to know you guys and understand kind of how you do things. Prior to joining the Biden Group at that point in time, 2010, I was with SunTrust Bank as a portfolio manager, so I've got some portfolio management experience as well. And I'm actually kind of a neighbor. I live actually over in Oviedo,
Wow.
so it takes me about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes this time of day to drive over here. So very excited to have a chance to come out here today and kind of see what you guys got going on. This was actually, when I joined the firm, this was actually the first meeting I ever covered back in probably 2010.
It had to be the one and only meeting I couldn't make.
I remember very clearly in 2010, that was a pretty shaky time in the market. I know we've had a lot of conversations about real estate here. You guys are kind of fired up about real estate in 2010 when I was out here too, because there was certainly a lot of disruption in the market at that point in time. It was about a smooth sailing in between now and then, but it was actually the first meeting I ever covered. So,
Yeah. So obviously it's important. I put somebody that would be very senior with you guys. Like Jack said, it was the important thing, in my opinion, anyway, is. He's got portfolio management experience. I think that gives you a different way of thinking, and it gives you a different approach. And also, as Jack said, we worked together, actually on my investment committee with the Bogdan Group. So he was a critical member of that committee. So great background. So we'll be double teaming you, and the transition will be gradual, and hopefully it'll be seamless for you. So we'll be adding Jack to all communications, and he'll be stepping up that effort first. That's a great way to get acclimated, and we'll go from there. Any questions?
Just want to say on behalf of the board in Winter Springs, welcome, Jack, and thank you for your expertise. Also, too, equally important, David, in your next steps and your transition, we wish you, the best of luck, obviously, and you're going to be with us for a while, but, congratulations and well-deserved.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure working with everyone, and I look forward to continuing to work with everyone until the transition's complete. So with that, let's jump into some market leveling discussion here, and then maybe zero in ultimately on page 15 here, our asset allocation. So obviously, as everybody in this room is aware, the key drivers of conversation and everything right now is obviously tariffs. Just looking at the critical considerations behind the tariffs, arguably it's been the uncertainty that has been so difficult for financial markets and corporations, big and small, to deal with. We had the pretty big market correction on the day of the initial announcement. that was rescinded. That was the first rescindment, and we had a nice market recovery after that. Subsequent to that, there were a number of, additions and then rescindments, additions and rescindments. So the market arguably has become somewhat desensitized, I think, to the volatility that's been created here. Where are we now? The average tariff right now is right around 16%. Obviously, there's a few country outliers that are yet to be negotiated, but with a 16% tariff rate, that's not significant. If you're talking about profit margins, that's really not significant enough to get corporate America to, relocate plant manufacturing to the United States. However, according to the CEO of the Port of LA, who I think is a pretty good data source here, the tariffs to date have raised almost $1 trillion in, I'm going to call it tax revenue. And so that's something we don't hear about. That goes to the U.S. Treasury. What happens to that from here, we'll see. But it's been a powerful revenue raiser. So the next question is who is paying and how are tariffs affecting the economy? So again, referencing the Port of LA, again, I think is a great source. They just set a new record for containers coming in from the Pacific. First record was set first quarter. Second breaking record was set during the June quarter. So what appears to be going on here, there's an enormous amount of front running and trying to position ahead of the final number that sticks. So arguably this may be masking the real underlying flows. And once this works out, we may be seeing a slowdown. So the consensus forecast right now seems to be that we will start to see economic impact coming in the third and definitely the fourth quarter. So the second question on the table or consideration on the table is who's paying for the tariffs? I like to make a simple K economy chart example. If you look at the upward sloping line in the K, that arguably represents the large Fortune 500 companies. These companies have the ability to zigzag, adapt, adopt, and they've got the administration. They can resource, double source, do whatever they need to do to remain profitable. We'll see to what extent their companies are able to do that. As you guys are aware, GM reported, we had Home Depot earnings this morning. We're about to get all the retailer earnings forecasts coming out. So we'll see how that goes, how Target, how Walmart is coping with this, because they're obviously frontline. They're affected on the very front line. The bottom line of the K, I would argue, represents small business America. Small business America is getting hit arguably pretty hard. And I would suggest just some localized, very unscientific, informal experiences that I've had. I've got a friend who is in the retail business, and he does the R&D and engineering and develops very high-tech Waterman-related products, and he has them all manufactured in China. He's done very profitable business for the last 35 years. He's at the point now where he doesn't know if he should reroute to India, to Vietnam from China, to Mexico, to India. As a small business person, he's about done. So we'll see what happens to him. I had I had an interaction over the weekend. Actually, I was getting a bimini top and whole canvas for my boat, and I just incidentally asked the guy. They got 5 employees. I asked the guy, how tariffs impacted you, and whoa, did I hit a button? he got extremely upset, and he says the cost of an aluminum tube extraction for me, that's his raw stock, obviously, went up 300%. He's had clients turn away business because they thought the total finished cost of the product was too expensive. People are used to paying what they used to pay. So his business is also struggling. Add to that you're required to get a surety bond for if you import a container, you bring it in, you got tariffs due, you're required to purchase a surety bond which guarantees that you will pay the U.S. Treasury the tariff due. And finally, who pays the tariffs? Again, home-based example, my wife ordered a fancy retro Italian oven. We've been waiting for a month and a half to get it. I get a notice from DHL that I need to pay this tariff or they're going to ship it back to Italy. And I did my iPhone calculator on the spot, and that happened to coincide with the tariff that was in place with the Eurozone. At the moment, I paid the tariff, so arguably at this point, it's that low bar on the K economy here that is feeling the most of it. So we'll see how this shakes out. But one thing that has happened that leads me to my recommendation tonight, if you go back to July 31st, the one pager I printed for you shows where yields were. That's the full yield curve as of July 31st. That was month-end close. And remember, when we put on our short-term cash strategy that we've been enjoying and reaping nice coupons, right, with a short-term intermediate bond fund, or I'm sorry, with a short-term bond fund and large cash positions here earning that money market. When we put that trade on a year ago, the curve was downward sloping, but it was much more linear than it is today, right? So we were getting paid way, way less to own a 30-year bond, a 10-year bond, a 7-year bond. So we made the strategic decision, and based on observations, we're gonna emphasize cash, and we're gonna overweight equities, and that's gonna be the strategic structure of the portfolio. Well, as of last Friday's employment number, firing of the BLS woman aside, the downward revisions to employment were serious, and the bond market took those numbers seriously. So what happened, the next line you're looking at, the solid line, that's the dramatic decline in interest rates that resulted from that BLS labor report. So observationally, not to overstate the obvious here, but our opportunity to collect yields in the short-term treasury is done. And again, not to state the obvious for this astute group, but as you all know, if the Fed cuts interest rates, and that's what the bond market is forecasting here, 80% chance, then that 440 yield drops down to 4, drops down to 375, all depending upon, the market anticipating exactly what's going to happen. So we're potentially seeing a reduction, if not an evaporation, in the nice money market yields that we've been enjoying. So my recommendation tonight is to close out that short-term cash, short-term bond trade. And if you take a look at, actually, let me pop you up to page 20 of the report. And I'm sorry, Michael, we should have emailed the chart so you would have a copy of it, but I think you're familiar with what transpired after the employment number and, the differential in the yield curve now. If you go to page 20, we currently have a $3.1 million position in the Vanguard short-term bond fund, and we're also holding a significant allocation to cash. As of the June 30 print, we had $3.4 million in cash equivalents sitting in that money market. So again, consistent with the backdrop here, my recommendation is we close out this trade by selling all shares of the Vanguard short-term bond index, and we sweep some of the money market investment. And then part two of the trade, obviously, is where does this money go? And I would like to recommend that we place the money with the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund. Arguably, the fund is going to be much more opportunistic, or should be, I should say, much more opportunistic with return potential. And here, the current yield of that fund is a little over 5% net. And it is, just to remind everyone, this is our international bond fund, right? A third of the money in international sovereign debt, a third in high yield, and a third in mixed investment grade credit. The fund has performed very well for us, and we're just set up for a better, I think, a much better earnings environment within the bond market for this fund. I'd also point out in the front of the book, we currently have the dollar-euro at 1.16, right? So it's costing us $1.16 to buy 1 euro now. And 2 quarters ago, we were close to parity. I think it was like 103, 104. So while we're seeing depreciation in the dollar, should that continue, if the Fed cuts interest rates, might be likely, right? Then that provides an additional appreciation boost to any investments we have in various foreign investments there through the PIMCO fund. And again, we'll leave all of that to the PIMCO management team. Let them use their prowess to move the weightings around to be most opportunistic. So bottom line, I'll throw out for discussion. We close out the heavy cash trade and short-term bond trade, and liquidate all positions of the Vanguard short-term bond index fund. And with those proceeds, plus an additional $1 million swept from the receipts and disbursement account, we place those monies, additional monies, with the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund. So let me just stop there for our usual strategy discussion.
Well, go ahead, sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, you're fine. So just make sure I've got it right. Getting rid of Vanguard short-term bond index and adding it to PIMCO Diversified Income. If I got your percentages roughly right, a third high yield, a third international, and a third investment grade credit.
Right.
If we're expecting the potential for an economic slowdown, does the high yield exposure give us any pause as far as the potential for defaults?
Yeah, great question. So there was a question earlier, what are credit spreads doing? And right now, everything is remaining pretty tight. So again, as everybody on this committee knows, credit spreads are a good precursor of things to come. If that's the case, though it's not perfect, if that's the case, we're in a pretty reasonably sound environment, notwithstanding a potential slowdown. But also on the other side, obviously the equity market is anticipating continued growth. And we just came through, another round of surprisingly constructive earnings. So the equity market, continues to prosper. Well, that's concentrated more in the AI tech stocks. Nevertheless, the net gains are suggesting continued prosperity. So I'm not aware, and Jack, you might be, I might be missing something, but I'm not aware of any of the leading, if I can use that term, strategists that are looking for any sort of dramatic slowdown or dramatic recession that would severely impact credit spreads. Plus, not to be long-winded with the answer, but we also have diversification across yield curves around the globe, and those foreign, that sovereign debt is with countries that are holding a higher quality rating. So we have that little bit of surety in there too. So the only questionable amount might be that third allocation to high yield. And again, we would defer to the PIMCO management team to pass their best judgment on how much over that third or under that third, that we should be in. And again, as you guys are aware, they've got a really strong track record of success with that. Am I addressing the question? Great question.
No, and I appreciate it. And I like PIMCO generally. I know they do their own credit research as well, which, good feather for their hat. I don't know the fund well enough offhand to know if they have guardrails around those asset allocation changes within their fixed income holdings. Are they able to scale back their high yield?
There are, yeah.
Okay. Do we know what that guardrail
They're a
is?
little bit broader on the mutual fund prospectus level, typically. But yeah, there are some guardrails, and the focus of the fund, the stated focus of the fund is income generation. So they're not trying to earn total return through calling interest rates. It's generally through income generation.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Michael? Arif?
No, I'm good with everything. Thanks.
So I have a question, Dave. For the tips, they're dropping, interest rates projected to drop in September, maybe 1, maybe 2. So we have the tips fund from the Vanguard Inflation Fund. Why don't we address some of that?
Some additional?
No, trying to get rid of the inflation Vanguard Fund.
Oh, for the Treasury Inflation Protection Securities. We have a very small allocation. That's something that we could consider closing out. Remember, the original strategy for the long-term strategy for including that fund 15 years ago, I think still holds some water. And remember, since we are in our core bond fund is intermediate, right, 1 to 10 year, we don't have a lot of duration or interest rate sensitivity in that portfolio. I mean, we do, but not compared to the aggregate index if we had that as our off-the-shelf benchmark. So the Treasury Inflation Protection Securities, that's got a longer duration. However, its behavior is a little more mundane than comparable treasuries, right? So that part of the strategic reason for having that in there is to give it a little long-dated duration to the overall portfolio in the event that, we do get a rate decline. Now, obviously, tips are not going to perform anything like, a regular treasury. But if you look historically, they do provide that longer duration appreciation when we have that flight to quality. So that was kind of the core reason for having that allocation there. As far as strategic positioning of it now, I think you could make an argument to lighten it or move it on. It is a very small position. We have worked it down pretty far. I'd make the argument that we should keep it as an anchor so that we can add to it rather than establishing a whole new, fund, going through that whole new fund process. Just if we want to go back to it in the future as the cycle changes. So I just suggest hanging on to that small position for now, just as a position anchor. Does that make sense?
So generally, when the interest rate drops, since you say the duration is longer for the tips, so there will be a projected increase in the growth of it. Yes, but it will be more subdued, just as if when interest rates went up, right, the tips portfolio did not depreciate as much in price. So it's kind of a smoothing agent. Mm-hmm. It's not perfect, but it definitely provides us more a duration offset to the intermediate portfolio. Again, it's not a perfect play, but it has worked pretty well for us, going back several years through cycle. So going back to the Vanguard short-term bond, if you eliminate that all and then there is a need for us to get back in, is there a longer process or is it straightforward?
To liquidate?
No, liquidate, and if we need to go back to it, should we hold some position in it?
Short answer, no, but we would have to review it. I think if we're out of it for more than a year, we'd probably have to redo the vetting process. But if we went back to it in under a year, as long as the board's comfortable with it, you know, we're still familiar with it, you know, we would be able to reload, if you will, if the circumstances suggested that was appropriate.
It is an index fund.
Yeah, and, yeah,
So-
Jack Point is an index fund, yeah.
So we wouldn't have to worry about being too nimble to get back into an index fund.
No.
Yeah, I mean, we can do it in a meeting, you know, we'll drop the LLD for finance, they'll send it in, and we're done.
Okay.
That's all I have questions.
I mean, I guess the only, just point of clarity there then for me would be kind of the rationale for keeping the inflation-protected securities position is, as you said, an anchor and kind of keeps our foot in the door if we need to reallocate to it later for any reason. But that same logic, we don't see that for the short-term bonded position. Both are index funds, right?
Yeah, I think the TIPS portfolio still has a purpose in the longer-term scheme of things, because we don't know where interest rates are gonna go, right? I mean, right now, the market thinks they're going down, but we don't know. And we're not about to attempt to call it. So just leaving that in there, I think is consistent with the longer-term strategy, through-cycle strategy. However, the short-term bond fund, that was a step-out strategy where we were being observational of the yields available, and we're like, hey, we're putting that in there, and it worked very, very well. But now, not calling interest rates in any way, just being observational, at the moment, those yields are gone.
Understood. Appreciate that.
Yeah, okay. Good question. Yeah, great discussion points.
David, just kind of following up on the inflation piece, if we can go back to that maybe more from a macro standpoint. So, you know, you said that potentially, you know, we're at 16% tariff rates. You know, I don't know where we're going to settle. Maybe you have insight on that. You also said that the Port Authority of LA raised $1 trillion worth of tax revenue. Almost. And so there's been some discussion, of course, in the media as well with regards to this new sleeve of income, you know, for the U.S. government. So maybe two questions. One, if we're going to issue less treasuries because we have a new revenue source, how does that affect the equity market? You know, maybe, you know, medium, long term, I don't know, or medium term. And then secondly, you know, is your analysis pointing towards a muted inflation environment in the sense that what possibility would there be to revisit this conversation like 6 months from now and all of a sudden, you know, inflation took off, you know, and then we're thinking about, oh gosh, they lowered rates, now they're going to jack up rates again.
Yeah, so let's take the easy one first. Treasury
One of
issuance,
those
right?
was the easy one.
No, I think the treasury issuance one is the easy one. The second one's the hard one.
Okay, well, I have no idea on either, but
Yeah,
that's why we're
yeah,
asking.
great,
So, yeah.
great discussion items here. I think any reduction in treasury issuance would obviously be a positive. In the event that interest rates do decline, the Fed does cut, that's positive. That's a positive engine for influence on equity markets, right? Because that's going to be a stimulus.
Except the $1 trillion came out of all of our pockets, and that might be a negative. So that's the real question: is how
So
far
that's the
back,
second question.
how far back do you want to go? Because I think on the surface, that's absolutely right. Like, more revenue is better, but where's the revenue coming from, and what does it do for growth? That's where it gets a little sticky, and I don't know the answer to that yet. It kind of depends on how long a tariff's going to stick around. I think there's a lot of people who aren't so sure that this is a permanent environment that we're in, and I think you look at I know a guy who's very high up in the finance area of General Mills, and they are like a lot of other big companies that are trying to figure out, okay, do we try to move things over here, which is not a simple process, because you have to build plants, you have to staff the plants, you have to have all these things. It's billions of dollars that you have to spend to be able to do this. So to feel comfortable doing that, you have to feel pretty certain that this is going to be around for a while. Like, you don't want to write a $10 billion check and have somebody say, oh, just, we're done with that. And all of your advantage that you had in, wherever you were doing your manufacturing is gone. And now you're in a higher cost environment and there's no benefit associated with it. So I think they're kind of sitting on their hands right now and waiting to see what's going to happen. Do they need to, scale back their manufacturing because tariffs are going to take, a lot of costs, and it's going to definitely hurt the demand for their products? Is that something that longer term is going to be there forever and they can move manufacturing back over here? I know some of the some big manufacturers have come out and said, hey, we're willing to do this, right? We're start making cars here, we're going to start making this here, and all these kind of things, but it takes a while to get those up and running. So
Yeah, in the meantime, we're paying it.
yeah, and I think we haven't necessarily seen all of the impacts of that, but I think there's starting to be some cracks in the consumer, which is a problem. And
Yeah,
if that's
so-
the case, then I don't know if it's better.
Yeah, because you're saying that, the consumer has less money to buy stocks, or
Yeah.
invest.
Well,
But, yeah.
to buy stocks, and then the companies make less money, and then so earnings are lessened by the fact
Yeah.
that people aren't.
And then you have a earning or a multiple contraction potentially. Yeah, but so we're always going is, so if the intent of the sleeve, the income sleeve is potentially to pay, off our interest, our cost of interest, with regards to that end of it, and we stop, let's say aggressively issuing treasuries, could that be a liquidity problem for the market?
Yeah, and that concern and argument has definitely come up. It's surfaced in a big way, almost in a regular cycle. And inevitably, and maybe this time will be different, but inevitably the treasuries get placed. And
They do it anyway.
Yeah, it goes anyway. Now, whether that revenue from tariffs goes against a credit against the big, beautiful bill that's still, what, $3-4 trillion in the hole? That's not for us to govern. Hopefully it does, and then that will take some pressure off Treasury issuance. But I think, the second issue you raised, I think, is the harder one. To Jack's point, it's the harder one to, figure out where this is going to go. I just know from my personal experience dealing with small businesses, it's putting enormous pressure on, I don't want to call them mom and pop businesses because they're not, but it's putting enormous pressure on small businesses. They have to pass through the cost. At some point, the average consumer, which is on the bottom leg of that K, right? We even have a K economy, right? Now we got a bifurcated economy. We got the haves that are extremely productive, continue on, wealth growth, and then we have the less productive elements, economically speaking, and they're really starting to struggle here. And that's what doesn't seem to be showing up yet. And I don't know, I think we'll probably start to see that in the third and fourth quarter. I mean, it has to start somewhere. And so far, we've been insulated from all the front running that's been going on. So that, jury's out on, to Jack's point, jury's out on that one. But it's got to show up somewhere at some point. And I think the bottom end of the economy and smaller business are they going to be the first to be impacted. And they don't necessarily show up in a big way in the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports, right? That's geared more towards
larger businesses and Fortune 500 type companies. So, yeah, great discussion item to kick around.
Yeah, yeah, so
They don't
just,
answer that, but
you know, just from a PM standpoint, you know, managing the portfolio. So regardless of what happens, what's known as rates on the short term are going down, on the short end are going down.
seems likely.
Okay, so with regards to, there's, you know, it's the duration on the PIMCO fund is not, you know, it's not that far out,
5.6.
5 years or
something
something.
like that.
Yeah.
I have that right
It
here.
might be closer to 7.
I think 5.14.
5.14, thank you.
Well, that's 5.08 on what I'm looking at, so it's yeah, something like that.
So in theory, if we had like this, you know, let's say this political pressure to reduce rates, right? And the narrative was wrong because inflation, and inflation started to take off, and then, you know, by obligation, they had to go the other way, you know? But this recommendation would be the best recommendation in both scenarios.
Yeah, I think so. And if I can expand on this topic, I think it's really interesting. The inflation, if we get inflation, it's artificial, right? Because it's man-made. It's been made by tariffs. It's not a demand-generated inflation. So if you're the Federal Reserve, you're not going to increase interest rates because inflation is going up. In a normal environment, you would, right? Because you need to cool off demand. But in this case, it's an artificially created inflation, which is putting a strain
It's called stagflation.
on the economy. Yeah, it's a stagflation. So that seems like that's the more likely scenario, just for, you know, fun discussion purposes. But in either case, I think we don't want to be attempting to call interest rates. We want to be observational. I think we can very cleanly, as we just did, observe that the short-term cash trade is gone for the moment. And I think just observationally looking at the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund being so diversified and income generated, I think we can weather through, you know, the various scenarios we're talking about, and probably handle things a little bit better, fixed income wise, through the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund.
Does the PIMCO fund have the ability to move duration within certain guardrails on the portfolio?
Yeah, they do, but it's not a focus.
Okay.
Yeah, income.
Current income is the primary, right.
Income is the primary focus of the fund, but they can.
They're actually a little
moderate.
long right now, actually.
Yeah.
Compared to their benchmark. I was trying to find the country exposure, but I cannot on my phone.
Was that, I mean, great discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
As always.
Okay, Michael has a comment or question?
Yeah, question. Dave, I think you said you had some recommendations. Are there others that we should be talking about before we move forward with this one?
The other consideration at the last meeting, we discussed rebalancing equities. And we decided to refrain and let the portfolio run, hindsight 2020, that served us well. So just going back to the asset allocation page on 15, the domestic equity allocation, if we fast forward through August, you know, we are approaching the outer bands of the policy limits. So the second recommendation to throw out more for discussion, I think, would be, do we want to take out some of that equity allocation, maybe a 2% reduction in the domestic equity? And again, those monies would not go to cash. That would be an additional investment into the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund. And that would bring our non-core fixed income allocation, you know, into an overweight position. And we, you know, we're coming up to the end of the fiscal year.
you know, it might be a good opportune time to take 2% or so off the table of our domestic equity index fund. So that was the second recommendation for consideration.
I like that.
Is that, I'm sorry, is that the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to clarify as well, I think we'd previously also put a potential search out on the RBC Voyager Fund.
Yeah, that was, the transition is in process.
Okay.
Right?
Perfect.
And once we receive funding for that, that's going into the other fund that was selected, DFA fund. And the other question on the table was, is there a CIT version for that fund? And there's not. So we've already, you know, we've emailed back and forth on that. So as soon as we receive those proceeds, we'll reinvest all those funds into the DFA fund.
Understood.
Yeah.
And then just last point of clarity as I'm looking at the asset allocation page, our maximum allocation at 55%, the investment policy statement does allow for us to exceed that if we don't make this change.
I mean, we can, but as fiduciaries
Sure, I
following
understand.
rules that we set together, it would be advisable to, you know, rebalance, following the discipline of rebalancing, yeah.
Of course, I was just curious how flexible the IPS is.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Other questions, comments?
It's Michael. My comment would be on the domestic allocation that come back and see me when it hits 55.
Any other comments? Questions? Thoughts?
I'm okay with as recommended. I mean, we're talking about a 2% reduction from 53 to 51.
Yeah, so
That
we're,
brings, I
so
mean, that's not even
Yeah.
at the target allocation, that's still a
it's like in
tactical
between,
overweight.
in between the minimum and max, kind of.
Right,
It'd be
exactly.
$1.5 million.
So it's $854,500 is 2%, approximately, based upon this statement,
Of total fund.
on the 42,725 for domestic, right?
So on the 80 million asset value, that would be 1.6,
1.6
right?
on the total.
And, you know, I knew this one was going to cause some discussion, so.
Oh, wait,
prepared.
so I thought, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. I thought it was taking 2% of the domestic equity securities.
2% of the total asset value, which would then rebalance 1.6 million.
Got it?
Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't clearly stated.
So that will bring the domestic down to 51-ish percent.
51, yeah.
But we're taking 1.6 from VITSX.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so 51%.
And I'm sorry, reallocating that to where again?
So those monies would also go to the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund.
I see.
We want to keep that money working.
And you want to add, and on top of that, here's what I got in summary. Sell all shares of the Vanguard
Short term.
short-term bond index, thank you, and place into the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund, which is PDIIX.
Right.
Okay, that's number one, and then place an additional $1 million from,
cash.
that's cash, right? What do we call
Right.
that?
Yep.
We call that something.
The money market?
From the money market,
Money market.
R&D money
The
market.
receipt and disbursement. we
Receipts
call
and
that money mar- Okay,
disbursements, yeah.
receipt and disbursement. Also to purchase PDIXX, and then selling VITSX, 1.6 million, and also moving that in to PDIIX, PIMCO Diversified Income Fund.
Right, assuming the board agrees.
Okay, and there's
Mr.
three.
Chairman, Michael here.
Yep, go ahead, Michael.
Quick question to staff. This is August. Where are we with respect to any deposits coming into the trust? I know that we typically have a couple larger ones that are added in. Are we done this year until next fiscal year, or are we expecting something in the next, 45 days or so, or more like 35 days, I guess, to be coming in?
Holly Queen, Finance Director, for the record. So all we have left year to date is going to be around $394,000 to go into the fund.
The normal payroll contribution.
Correct.
Thanks. If we take $1 million out, that brings us to about 2.7 million in the receipt disbursement account. Or what's our negative cash flow each month without deposits or without any extraordinary large deposits? Are we still at something like 430,000 a month?
Correct. We're around 400,000 negative outgoing every month. So the 2.4 million, 2.7 million that would be in there would last for us approximately 6 months, 6 or 7 months.
The run rate's
Okay.
400,000 a
I'm fine
month. So that's okay, over 12 months, got it. Okay, divided by 2. 2.4 in 6 months, right?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, so Michael, it's right now there's 3.483 in there, 992. So that would drop it, obviously, to 2.483, 992.
Yeah, but then there's going to be a contribution coming in from regular cash flow, so you have to, if you pull that in. So if we have 6 months available, I'd be okay with that $1 million as well. But, Mr. Chairman, I'd appreciate it if we had 2 separate motions here, one for the liquidation of Vanguard short-term and the contribution to the PDIIX from the cash and disbursement account, and then a second discussion on the rebalancing of the domestic equities.
Okay, so you're proposing a discussion on the rebalancing of the equities to PDIIX, but you're also proposing a motion, of the first one, which is selling all the Vanguard short-term. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just requesting whoever makes the motion that we make sure that we silo this and we have 2 separate decisions, not one.
Got it.
I'll make a motion
So
then to,
if everybody's ready, I'll be happy to make the motion
So just
to liquidate the Vanguard short-term bond index and reallocate those funds into the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund that we currently hold, and as well as moving $1 million from the receipt and disbursement account, money market fund, also into the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Board Member Fair,
aye.
Board Member Blake,
Fine.
Vice Chair Fareed,
Aye.
Chair Santoro.
Aye.
Thank you, Michael. Those are 2 definitively different
You can make a second
recommendations.
motion.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so Michael, do we want to discuss more about the equity move? I know what you said earlier, obviously, with regards to letting it run to 55%, so that's a discussion point,
Yeah,
right?
the recommendation to rebalance the domestic equities is I simply feel that in the current interest rate environment and certain aspects with respect to the economic, how should I say this? The evolution of the current economic situation, that I personally am comfortable with us not rebalancing the domestic equity position yet. It is on the radar, but my standpoint is that we would continue to hold that position a little bit longer.
So our next meeting is what, October, November?
I think it's November.
November. So, okay, so we, theoretically, excuse me for being theoretical, but we get a rate cut, market, should like it, buys us some time, to make a decision, et cetera. We kick the can down the road potentially per Michael's thought process. We reevaluate in November. Maybe we have better numbers with regards to the pull through and the cost of tariffs. Just thoughts, I don't know. Other thoughts? What do you guys think?
So my initial thought is, we as a fiduciary, we take the step of reducing the equity exposure because it's got past the middle point and bring it down to 51%. Knowing what the after effects of the tariff would be, like the stagflation comment that was made, that's also coming up in discussions every day in our office. So as a fiduciary, I would be more on the side of caution than on the side of possible growth.
I'd second that comment. I think we're still tactically overweight our target on the policy if we reduce it by 2%. And it just helps keep us more in a fiduciary positioning, I believe. I think the old adage is pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. It's been nice to be a pig in the space, but I certainly don't want to be a hog.
Okay, so we've got a few different opinions here. Well, actually, two that are conservative. Michael would like to obviously let it run to 55. My personal opinion on it is, we have ample equity exposure at 51%. I'm a little bit in between on it, but, I feel like we have ample equity exposure at 51, 52, so.
I'd like to make a motion then that we accept the recommendation as presented to reduce the equity exposure 2%.
I second that.
For clarification, that is to reduce the domestic equity exposure by 1.6 million and to direct those funds where?
To PLIIX, the PIMCO Diversified Income.
PDIIX.
PDIIX, sorry.
So, yeah, so specifically, we're going to sell 1.6 million of the position, which is VITSX, and that's the Vanguard equity position that we have. Vanguard Total Stock Market, VITSX, and move that into PDIIX. That's the motion. 1.6 million.
Correct. Mr. Chairman, question for our consultants. If we go back to the allocation page 15, how will that transaction impact each of the categories with respect to overweight or underweight?
So that will move obviously it moves the domestic equity back to approximately a 1% overweight. And then with the rebalancings and reinitiation into the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund, that'll move our non-core fixed income to an overweight position.
So we would be moving our equities basically to an equal weighting and overweight on the non-core fixed, which then we line that up next to our broad market fixed income, which is also at an overweight position. So we would have overweight across the board in our fixed income.
Correct. With a greater emphasis with this transition being on the more opportunistic non-core fixed income.
Understood. Understood. I would ask the board to consider whether or not in this environment we are willing to be overweight in fixed incomes and not be overweight basically in equities.
Okay, thoughts from the board?
I mean, just to clarify, we would still be slightly overweight on our domestic equity allocation, underweight our foreign equity allocation, but in total, still overweight investment policy, because our biggest underweight, where we're kind of taking all that from, is not really the fixed income, it's the real estate allocation that we've taken that from.
Right.
So we're both overweight equities as well as fixed income at the cost of being underweight direct real estate.
Correct.
Okay.
With a real estate allocation that continues to be paid out, and I have an update for that for
Right.
you as requested.
Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with that, because we're still overweight in both categories, because that was the decision we made, last year, to get in line for the real estate fund. I mean, that's got to go somewhere.
And at the moment, the distributions the dribs and drabs distributions we're getting, we've been reviewing every quarter with the cash balances. So with the cash strategy previously in place, that was an easy decision just to put it into the short-term cash, but that's gone now. So now those monies would be available for a broader asset allocation discussion as far as where they would go. But they're not significant distributions coming in. It's been, and we expect it will continue to be dribs and drabs.
You're talking about the yield from the direct real estate?
Talking about we put in a full redemption request for both funds, and the managers are both piecemealing the distributions. So in the case of, I just got locked out here. So in the case of American Realty, we had a redemption, remaining redemption balance, or I'm sorry, a remaining balance of $509,000, and we've received redemption payments totaling about $1.5 million. And they've been coming out roughly between 100 and 100, and let's call it 150,000 a quarter. Not a lot, but it is getting paid out. And then in the case of Intercontinental, as of 12/31/24, we had a market value of $3.7 million. And as of the most recent valuation, we're down to $2.4 million. So again, roughly 150. Well, these distributions have been all over the board. So we have received as little as 150 and as much as 900,000.
So this is like a return of capital, essentially? Like they're doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
return of initial investment, remaining equity ownership. Yeah.
Okay.
There was some belief from Intercontinental that would speed up in the second half of this year. I'm not sure. They were in our offices not long ago, and I'm not sure what the likelihood of that is going to be, but they referenced things like property sales that they thought they had in line, and including a line of credit that they thought they could tap to clear the redemption queue. So I'm not sure we'd be in favor necessarily of a line of credit tap, but that's on them, and that's something that they referenced to us. So that may move a little faster. As far as the yield is concerned, I think the yield has been pretty consistent at about 1% a quarter. It's just the transactions that have been very slow.
Yeah.
So, and just for clarity on my sake as well, to follow up on my previous question, as of June 30th, we've got about 3.3 million left between Intercontinental and Crescent. In that case, as those redemptions come in, albeit slowly, where are we allocating that to, and what's the process for that?
So with the Crescent, if you go to the book, the first fund obviously is almost entirely paid out. which, by the way, the very small dollar balances remaining in the first fund are, you know, basically being used for fees. So it's making the performance look bad, but on a dollar-weighted basis, the dollars remaining are pretty insignificant. On Fund 2, Crescent Fund 2,
What page is that, Dave?
that's on page 53. So for that fund, you know, we've crossed the threshold there, and the original 2 million commitment, we have a remaining capital commitment of 1.1 million, and we've received distributions totaling 2.3 million. And that equated to a inception IRR of about 8.7%. So obviously, these are private investments,
Yeah.
so we can't control the distributions, but we expect, you know, the pacing of everything, you know, to be pretty consistent.
So, I mean, this is a non-traded mortgage REIT, essentially. Because it's paper.
It's a direct lending
Yeah, okay,
portfolio.
got it,
Yeah.
okay. So it's private credit.
It is
Yeah.
private credit,
Yeah, it is private credit.
Yeah, and most of their loans are sponsor backed by private equity, lower middle market companies.
Okay.
Are we
So I
ready
guess
to
finish
vote?
The question,
On the motion?
so these cash flows coming in, the distributions coming from the private debt, which is a very small position, private credit, and the distributions coming back from the two real estate managers have been a bit erratic, but steady, reasonably steady in frequency. Those have just been going into cash, and we've been using that to cover cash flow and could continue to use those distributions to cover cash flow requirements. But previously, because of the cash strategy, it was just an easy layup to let the money get rolled into the money market sweep vehicle.
I guess what I'm missing here is like on the Intercontinental, that's hard assets. And their policy is to liquidate the entire portfolio over, you know, over sales, real estate sales?
Actually, no. So both American Realty and Intercontinental are open-end funds. So the funds are in perpetuity. They're not private structure. So the fact that we put in a redemption request to a non-publicly traded fund, right? So they're managing the redemptions in a manner that doesn't injure
Yeah.
those investors that are staying in the fund.
Got it.
Yeah, it's an evergreen strategy, but they open windows every quarter
Yeah.
that if you give them, I think it's 2 months notice, then you can get into the next window to get your, now the problem that they've had is that there's been a lot of people obviously that have gotten into those, into the redemption queue, and there just hasn't been a lot of transactions in the real estate market. So the queue has built up. And normally what they would do is hope to manage inflows and outflows in a normal market, and it just hasn't been a normal market. So,
They're not getting any dispositions. They're kind of locked.
yeah, I mean, and they're not alone. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
whole list of real estate managers that are in a very similar situation, and you know, the problem that Intercontinental has, I guess, problem relative to some others, they got stuck with a little higher percentage of retail or office assets, and that's the worst place to be. And so until that shakes out, it's kind of in this situation where I think they're kind of stuck. They don't have the huge, you know, Manhattan properties that I think are generally speaking to be the sort of the premier real estate assets. And you hear about, you know, people going back to office, JP Morgan and all those. Jamie Dimon, that's all he talks about now is going back to the office.
Oh, he's got his vanity project there at 270 Park there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they've got a pretty big real estate fund as well, so.
I mean, the office space is Class A property, but to Jack's point.
So it's outside metro areas.
It's peripheral.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
It's like, it's
mid-market.
basically dead.
Yeah, I mean, there's the billion-dollar buildings, multi-billion-dollar buildings. It is a diversified fund. It's in a lot of big cities across the country. It's probably more northeastern focused because that's where they're headquartered. But it's a diversified fund, but they do have a little more office than most. Or at least I would say some. I can tell you what that is actually. Like, office space, about 30% of the fund. The Odyssey, which is the open-end diversified core equity index, which is a collection of like funds, averages about a little over 16. So they're not the highest, but they're certainly not the lowest when it comes to that. And I think that was partly just maybe reading the tea leaves, but certainly kind of what they had. Office was the premier place to be. That was the single largest section of the core real estate market forever. So that's what you wanted to have because it was bulletproof. And then we had COVID and all of a sudden it wasn't.
Okay, thanks,
Does that
John.
address the cash flow,
Yeah.
if I can call it pacing?
Yeah, it does, thank you.
Okay, so,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah, yes, please, Michael.
I think we do have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
Are we ready to
We
vote on
should
that motion?
probably limit our discussion to that motion and then discuss other items once that motion is disposed of.
Yeah, so I think we went through that motion actually, but do you want to make it, let's make it again just for clarification.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to take 1.6 million from the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, VITSX, and move it to the PIMCO Diversified Income Fund, PDIIX, at the recommendation of Mariner.
I second the motion.
And then, Mr. Chairman, my comment on that would be that would take us to targets on equities and a 12% overweight on fixed income.
Yeah, so I was trying to do the math there. I mean, I got 15.7% on non-core income. Is that accurate?
I'm using some broader measurements. If you look at equities, it takes us to 65%. If you look at fixed incomes, it takes us to 28%. 28% is a 12% overweight
On fixed income in
within
general?
that segment.
Yeah. Okay, so Michael, how do we handle that? That's noted, or that's noted for the next meeting? What do you suggest there?
I think he's just
I
making
won't
the
vote for
comment.
the vote. I won't support the motion only because I don't feel it's prudent to be overweight on fixed income at this point in time, and to be even weight on equities. That's my position. I'm only one of 5 members, 4 of whom are attending.
So I'll take the roll
Okay,
on the
well,
motion.
well noted. What? Go
I'll
ahead.
take the roll on the motion.
Okay.
Board Member Blake.
No.
Board Member Fair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Fareed.
Aye.
Chair Santoro.
Aye.
All right, we'll get that done. So if I can just leave you without taking up too much more time, with the return fiscal year to date, if we go to page 23, we're in pretty good shape as of June 30th. July and August, I would back of the envelope probably add another 1.5% or so of total return. The fiscal year to date net number through June is 624, pretty much on top of our target index. Biggest contributors obviously continue to be equities. And the other high point here is, I guess, if you go to page 25, the PIMCO diversified income from a total return perspective has been performing pretty well in here. Fiscal year to date, it has contributed 4.15%, and year over year, they actually ground out 9.37% return there. And then the other, obviously, discussed real estate, but happy to report that this is the third consecutive quarter where we saw positive returns, with both managers showing steady occupancy and throwing off, pretty decent leasing income for the underlying properties. So those would be the main contributors and high points. And I'll just leave you with cash flows if we go to page 20. Fiscal year to date, if you follow with me on the bottom line there, total portfolio opened the fiscal year with 78.3 million. There's our activity rebalancings that took place fiscal year to date under net transfers. Our contributions totaled 1.2 million. To the earlier conversation, money going out fiscal year to date, a little over 4 million. Investment management fees as invoiced and paid by the custodian, 100,000, and other line item expenses occurring, 118,000. The income component, we've earned 946,000. The appreciation was 3.8 million. So right around $4.5 million or so net of your fees here. Left us with a market value print June 30th of $80,216,790. Any questions on the report?
Any questions?
All right, great discussion as always, and appreciate your continued support.
Okay,
We'll
thank
get
you.
the directions done.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay, we're going to move forward. Thank you, David and Jack. Appreciate that. Go to public input. Is there any public input at this point? Okay. Okay, with that said, we're going to adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned. You want to
Great debate night.
Yeah.